All right, I'm back again. Hopefully, there's not too much background noise. My landlord is mowing outside the building, but I have to record all this with plenty of time to tweak the edits and filter out my worse flubs and miscodings and transitions and stuff, and still have time to get it out to you all before classes start on Monday. So I'm doing it now. Okay, so I've got up here the code we left off on previously. I've got that just right there. It's essentially just making a basic synthesizer. If I click in the canvas, we get a sawtooth sound. I forgot to change. This is me kind of experimenting a little bit with some stuff that didn't work out. Trying to make some things that didn't work, so I'm just going to reset that. I'll kind of edit that out of the last one if I didn't already. Actually, I'm going to change this. I'm going to make this a square wave for this example, just to show some differences. All right, so I've got this single synthesizer. I've got it set up to make one sound every time I click on the canvas. So we can hear that. Again, this was me kind of playing around. We actually are not going to do any of that, so I'm just going to delete it. You can ignore that completely. All right. So I'm going to start that again. All right, hey everybody, I'm back again with another video. Up here I've got the code from last time, just playing around with a little bit, again, tweaking some numbers. I'm actually going to put that back to 1. I'm just going to set this back to the default 0.5. I don't remember what the defaults for the others were, but they're there. But this just gives it a different sound. The only thing I've changed from before is setting the type here to square. So if I rerun this, we're now going to hear it sounds a little different. All right. So what I'm going to focus on this time is the last video, which is how to make a synthesizer. So this synthesizer will generate a specific note based on this trigger, attack, release method. And you can use multiples of these in different contexts to trigger specific notes. If you checked out the page in the book with a code that I linked, you can check all of that out. Kind of the details of that in the code on the class webpage. It's all right there. So what I'm going to show you all how to do is how to go in and kind of make a sequence of notes, how to make your synthesizer play multiple notes at one time with kind of one specific trigger. All right. So to do that, we need just a few things. The first thing we need is a kind of melody of notes to use. All right. So I have one. I'm going to be real unoriginal and copy this from the codes on the class book because I may have a few degrees in music writing, but I don't want to do that right now. So I'm utilizing this from my friend who wrote the original code. So we've now specified this melody. So basically what it is, just like down below where we specified a specific note, A4, on the keyboard, we specified a series of notes, all as strings. Because we're listing multiples off, this is an array. You'll notice these square braces there. What's maybe different from some arrays you've used before are the fact that there's now an array inside of this array. Later on in the sequence, we're going to be specifying exactly what a beat is and kind of how the tempo. Right? And kind of combining the tempo and the beat of this is to specify how quickly to move through this sequence of notes with our synthesizer. All right, so each little element in the array here is one beat. So let's say our tempo is, this fast. Every time I snap my fingers, we're going to move to the next element. So C3, I'm going to skip that part in the middle now. So A3, B2, C2, E3. That's kind of that middle section there. These elements that are inside of this inner level array, those are what's called subdivisions of the beat. All right, so for every one snap, it'll hit all of these in equal parts. So this would be, just to do the rhythm, would be da 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 da. That's a horrible rendition, but you get the idea. So we have our melody. I'm calling it the background melody because later on I'm going to be kind of combining a few things. This is just going to be background. Our end result is going to have this melody kind of ambiently playing. So it's going to play, and then it's going to be beat 1. This is all beat 2 right here because inside of this inner array, beat 3, beat 4, beat 5, beat 6. Beat 7 is A2 and G2. Beat 8 is C4. So that is our melody. You can play around with it on the keyboard if you want. You wanted to pause the video right now, that's fine. But since we're going to hear it anyways, I'm just going to kind of keep going. So we've stored all this in the array. And actually, I'm missing, I was going to say, that's going to save me some trouble later. All right. So we've got that there. What we now need are a few new things, kind of building off of our synthesizer. So this will still all be inside of our setup function, but we're just going to go right underneath making the synthesizer. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this a sequence. So I'm going to say background sequence because it's going with the background melody. And I'm going to let that equal a new Tone.sequence sequence. We have that right there. All right. So we're going to be doing a few things right here, but actually I forgot to at the top. Always want to declare your variables. In this case, we're doing them globally just so we can edit them. All right, so new tone.sequence. So now this is where things get a little kind of confusing. So this is going to be kind of a function that we're putting together. So I'm going to make it a function, and then it's going to get a few arguments. It's going to be the time and the note to play. All right. So we have that there. All right. So then I'm actually going to move this parenthesis down. Since this is a function, we have to define some stuff. So we're going to give it its own braces. Actually, I don't need to get rid of all that space. So inside of that, now we're going to move. We have this this trigger attack release from before. We're going to move that up here and put that inside of our new tone.sequence. I'm just going to delete that so we don't overlap. So now we're going to be triggering the attack and release in there. What's going to be different is now we are going to, excuse me. Okay, so we've now moved the simple synth trigger attack release from there to there. I'm going to specify that we're going to whatever the note. Get rid of that. So whatever the note from the initial function is, we're going to say that's what's going to be the NOTE. I cannot type today. But again, how's that any different from a normal class? So the note that is from our initial function from the tone.sequence, that's what we're going to filter into there. That's what's going to be replacing the A4 pitch that I had initially. We'll get into that in a second. I'm just going to set that. I'm going to push this back to 0.5 from the 1. All right, so we have that there. One thing I'm also going to do, just so we can kind of see some stuff, just for fun, is I'm going to go in and I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to log the note. So that way we can see what it is being played. All right. So we have that there. And then I'm going to close off the, I already had the close brace. Close that off, so we're done. All right. So then I'm going to just that a comma to separate that. So now what we need to tell it is what to feed in to the notes. All right. So we're going to say the background melody array, and how fast do we want this to be? Or I'm sorry, what division of music do we want it to be? I'm going to set this to what's called a quarter note. This actually has to be a string. There. All right. Did I goof that? What's my error? What's that say? I'm not sure what that is. All right, so I'm making this into a quarter note. So what's happening here is a quarter note is essentially within a musical measure. It's divided into quarters, or 4 pieces. So 4 in, quarter note, 4 parts. So it's kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, measure 2, B2, 3, 4, measure 3, and so on. So we have that there. You could specify a little bit that you could do an 8th note, which is just dividing it into 8 parts. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and da 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm not going to count it again, but you could go twice as fast with 16th notes, and so on and so on. I'm going to put this back at a quarter note. And essentially, when we get into the next part, that's going to be telling it how fast we're part of how fast we're going to move through this sequence of notes. All right, so once we've done this little line here, we then just have to we have to tell the clock how to kind of move through all of this stuff. All right, it's pretty straightforward, but we do need a few lines of things. So we're going to need to set a few values of things real quick. So I'm going to say, I'm going to move my cursor back. Tone.transport. So what this transport does is it's just kind of maintaining all of the clock in the background for this musical things. It's kind of the driving force. It's moving along all this stuff. But we need to set a few elements. So I'm going to say tone.transport.bpm.value. So the value of the BPM of the transport, or the BPM stands for beats per minute. In this case, we're defaulting it to just a normal common time signature. Again, musical elements in super detail aren't a huge part of this class, so I'm going to keep it right here. If you're wanting to make something in a different time signature than what I have happening, you can comment or send me a message and we'll get into that, how to tweak it. But the beats per minute, because I've set this to the quarter note, that's 4 beats per measure. It's essentially how many, if I was to keep going for a solid minute, how many of these would I hit? The default for the tone is 120 beats per minute. I'm going to slow that down just a little bit and go to 80. We'll play around with this once we have it all built up, but you can kind of adjust. That's essentially the speed. So this is how many beats per minute, and this is, at this point, is what the elements are in relation to the beats. So each one of these is a quarter note, is 1 beat. All right. So after that, we can then say tone, capital T, dot transport dot loop. So what this will do is this will say, all right, we want to loop this over and over again. We're going to start it when it ends. We're going to start it back at the beginning, and it's just going to keep going. To true, and I haven't. I'm going to basically, so you can set this to either, you can set this to true or false, off or on, that way there. But when you set it to true, you should just specify a few things. And actually, just to save me some time, I'm just going to copy this start bit because it's almost identical. It's going to specify the loop start, and that is equal to 0. And then the loop end will be equal to, and this is where it gets a little weird, because it's going to be formatted a little bit differently than some other stuff. So first off, this has to be a string, and this is telling us where to stop playing the sequence and then loop it back to the beginning. So we have the start of the loop and the end of the loop, and we're just combining them, sticking them next to each other. So this depends a little bit on where you want the music to start and stop over. Since we are doing quarter notes, so each of these is 1 beat. The default time signature is 4 beats per measure. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 1 measure. 2, 2, 3, 4. That's 2. Our little melody is 2 measures long. So you want to specify that we want this to be at the end of, stop it at 2 measures, and then no beats, no subdivisions of the beats. And that's what you type in there. If you wanted to stop it at measure 2, beat 3, you could adjust that there. Measure 2 and half, part way through beat 1, you could do that. Generally, this will be the most kind of straightforward way. I think it's just building it off of the measure level. You just kind of keep these colon 0 colon 0s as kind of a static thing. So we have that there. So now we're almost done with all of the automatic stuff. So I'm going to then say tone.transport, and I'm just going to say .start, and this starts the sequence. Now we're almost there. I said the main goal is to kind of trigger this to go and play the music. So we're going to have this happen here. So I'm going to actually make another thing. I'm going to repurpose this mouse press because we aren't going to use it for this example. And I'm just going to make this a new one called BG music. All right, so this is now a custom function. Because I want this melody to just be happening consistently in the background. So what we can say is inside of this function, we're just going to say sequence. Did I rename that? Background sequence. Background. So I'm going to name this background sequence dot start. So if you remember all of this is inside of the all of this is inside of the background sequence. This stuff where we're setting up the put in all of the melody that we want here. All right, so now we have this inside of a function. We just have to call that function. So I'm just gonna say background music. I'm doing this inside of setup, not in draw, because again, for the same reason, if I were to do it in draw, the draw function happens over and over again, 60 times a second by default. So it's going to try to start this sound continually for as long as the code is running. And you're just going to not be able to hear, you're going to hear it at the most, because it's going to keep starting, and then the next time the draw loop goes, it's going to start it again and again and again and again, and you're never going to actually get to hear it. So since the setup function happens one time at the beginning of your project, it's going to just start it once. And then since we've turned on the loop and set those parameters, it's just going to loop the sound and it's just going to continue automatically. So we have that there. You could adjust these values by setting up a conditional statement later down in your code. This could be in draw or in like function key pressed or something that could turn the loop on or off. You could do that later on, but for now, I'm just going to keep this going. So now if we run this, we should... So I'm going to bring that volume down a bit. I'm also bringing that down to my headphones so I can actually hear myself talk. So now what we've got going on here is our sequence is happening automatically. So now we can kind of experiment a little bit with what I have. I've See, adjusted that. So now we have all of the synthesizer and sequence stuff in our code. For this, I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to save this. So I don't lose anything in case of a malfunction. Now. And this is acting up, so got that there. I'm just gonna, yeah, I know. Sorry, this is the thing with P5. It's if the server connection gets off, it can't save. So what I did was just copy everything, refresh the page, paste in my sound. So I've got my computer stuff going. Should be real quiet in the background, so we can hear that. If you look, because I have this console.log here on line 24, you can see the current note being played at the bottom, and then just the sequence of them as they go. So we have that going. So just to kind of experiment a little bit, if you wanted to change some of the timbre and how we're getting that there, I could 0.05 decay 1.5 sustain 0.1 resonance, or sorry, release, not resonance, 5. If I were to rerun that, we get a different timbre to our sound. This is a little bit more noticeable here because we're hearing different notes. So you can really tweak these 4 values to get a sound more how you want. You could change the waves form here. So I've done sawtooth and square. Let's do sine real quick and refresh it. Actually, let me turn that up a bit. All right, and then I'm also going to just do triangle just so we can hear them all. So we can kind of hear that. I'm going to keep this at about this level. Right about there. So it's present, not too much. Actually, I'm going to be talking. I'm going to bring it down a bit. All right. I forgot. I turned my headphones down, so I'm not hearing it at the same level in the recording. I'm going to have to go back later and adjust that. We'll find out. So I've got that happening. So like I said, we've tweaked it. We've now heard all 4 of the of the waveforms. We've tweaked the envelope of the sound. We have that happening there. We have our sequence. We can now change some of these values. I'm going to do that. So we have this BPM, just kind of a nice, fun 80. The defaults of this program is 120. So if I increase it, it gets faster. Not sure offhand what the highest or lowest value is, but we can kind of experiment a little bit. If I set that to 200, it'll go up to 200. If I set that to 40, I'm sure it'll go down to 40. It's now half as fast as it was initially. All right. I'm going to put this back at 80 for now. If I were to comment out these lines with the loop right there and refresh it, and it didn't stop looping. I refreshed it, right? Huh. Interesting. So, going through this, you learn things that you had forgotten, and that was that it looks like the tone.transport.loop defaults to true. So if I set that to false and rerun this, we should okay. Now why is that not? That should not be loop. I'm just going to edit that part out. But anyway, you could change some of this. So like I said, we've now gone through and adjusted. We've heard all of the 4 main waveforms. We've tweaked the envelope a little bit. We can change some of this. If I wanted to make this, instead of quarter notes, make each of the elements in our melody array an 8th note. Change that to an 8. And so now we're going through that as if they were 8th notes instead of quarter notes. If I wanted to make it each one of them a half note, so we can adjust that. I can make this loop longer. I'm going to make this value shorter again. So we have that going on there. So using this method and the BPM, you can kind of tweak just how fast you want it. I think the safest bet is to kind of structure your melodies if you're building this off of kind of groups of 4 and 8 notes, and then just keep that as a quarter note, and then specify a BPM value, unless you have a sufficient musical knowledge, and can kind of tweak and say, oh, I want to have this kind of time signature with this kind of emphasis on it. And if you are writing a musical melody and want some help on that, I can definitely help you. That's just not a specific part of the class, so I'm not going to get into it in this video, but we can get into that if you're wanting to do this on your own. But you can kind of tweak all of that as you go. So we have that there, and I'll talk about how to get into that if we need it. Let me think. So kind of one more thing. This is kind of automatically starting and stopping at specific points, which is fine. I'm sorry. So we have our sound sequence here, and it's just automatically starting when we run our code and stopping when we stop our code. That's totally fine. You just kind of a general background loop music. In actuality, if you are doing this and want to write something, you want to try to find a melody that isn't boring to listen to over and over and over and over again. That's something that a lot of games with kind of a low audio budget have to kind of struggle with. You'll notice on a lot of mobile games, partly because of file sizes, but also because of budgets, that this the same track over and over and over again. It just repeats itself, so you got to try to find some way to make it less boring. That's more of an aesthetic choice, but that's just something to think about if you choose to set up your sounds like this, which just starts from beginning to end. In order to trigger it with the mouse, we can do the same kind of thing as we did before, and I'm just going to say function mouse press. You can do this with the keyboard with key pressed as well. It's up to you. I'm going to use the mouse, and I'm just going to say move that from here into there and comment it out. So now if I run this, forgot. All right, so now if I run this, we don't hear anything. But then if I click again, now that I've clicked, we're hearing the sound. All right, so now this is going to go until we tell it to stop. So I'm just going to add in one more thing, and that's going to kind of wrap out the video. Function mouse release. This does the exact same thing as function mouse pressed. The only difference is that it does it when the mouse is released instead of when it's pressed. So got that. A very informatively non-creative name. So we've just got start and stop. So now, if I go and click and hold the mouse, it will play it. But as soon as I let go, it will stop playing the sequence. So let's see here. This will be a little louder. I turned up the volume just a bit. Alright, so now I'm going to let go of the mouse and we should hear it stop. There we go. Alright, so why did I bring this up at the very end? Because, like I said, my goal is to be able to apply this into some code. So my next video I'm going to make is going to go in and it's going to take this kind of stuff and put it into, I'm specifically going to do it into the Paint app that we did. This is why I've got part of this line going on here. So I'm going to be doing it that way. So we'll have some background music, some stuff that gets triggered when we click in certain areas, things like that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do it into Bug Squish. I know a few students were having some issues with that towards the very end, but this will be something we can throw in. So mentioning that, that's kind of what the last assignment is to, after you've watched all 3 of these videos, to go in and add in some sound to your previous Paint app or Bug Squish. Leaning this more towards the Paint app because I know everyone finished that and they were all decent. So you would have a less chance of bugs happening, no pun intended, in that project. So that's where I'm going to go with that. But again, I will show you some ways you could do this in Bug Squish just because I would be remiss if I did not. So we'll have that there. I'm going to get, hopefully all of these will be up at the same time. If not, they'll be up shortly after one another, and we'll go from there. So I'll have this going, and I will see you in the next video.